At 0600 on March 3, 1943, in the Bismar Sea northeast of New Guinea, Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura stood on the bridge of his flagship destroyer and watched 8 transports and 8 escorts hold precise formation through waters that Japanese naval doctrine said belonged to the Empire. The convoy was carrying 6,900 soldiers of the 51st Division, men who had been promised to Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi at Lae, New Guinea, men whose rifles and ammunition and medical supplies would determine whether Japan could hold its forward positions in the Southwest Pacific. Kimura had every reason to believe they would arrive safely. Japanese warships had sailed these waters for more than a year without serious challenge from American surface forces. His destroyers had faced American bombing before, high-altitude B-17 flying fortresses that rarely hit anything, medium-altitude attacks that gave ships plenty of time to maneuver away from falling bombs, torpedo runs that required long, straight approaches, making the attacking aircraft perfect targets. Japanese naval doctrine had an answer for all of it. Concentrated anti-aircraft fire, sharp evasive maneuvers, fighter cover from the 11th Air Fleet based at Rabaul. These tactics had worked well enough that Admiral Gunichi Mikawa had approved this convoy despite knowing the Americans would detect it. What Admiral Kimura could not possibly know. What no Japanese naval officer could imagine in their worst nightmares was that American mechanics in workshops outside Brisbane, Australia, had spent the previous 6 months converting medium bombers into something the Imperial Japanese Navy had never encountered, never planned for, and had no doctrine to defeat. Within 4 hours, modified B-25 Mitchell bombers with 850 caliber machine guns protruding from their noses like the fangs of a mechanical demon would turn Kimura's convoy into burning wreckage scattered across 60 miles of ocean. The Imperial Japanese Navy's confidence in its anti-aircraft defenses would die with the ships. This is the story of how a former Navy pilot working in a field workshop in Australia created a weapon that destroyed Japan's ability to sustain its island empire, how 8 guns in a bomber's nose changed the Pacific War faster than any purpose-built weapon system, and how 6,900 soldiers sailing toward New Guinea met the one form of attack that Japanese naval training had never prepared anyone to survive. To understand what happened over the Bismar Sea on March 3rd, you need to understand what Japanese naval officers believed about aerial attack in early 1943. Their confidence was not arrogance, it was experience. For more than a year, Japanese convoys had faced American air attacks and survived them repeatedly through a combination of anti-aircraft fire and seamanship. The lessons were consistent. High-altitude bombing against moving ships was nearly impossible. Even the best American bombardiers, dropping from 7,000 feet, could only place bombs within a radius of several hundred yards from the intended target. A ship moving at 15 knots with room to maneuver could avoid most of those bombs with simple course changes. The hit rate in actual combat was devastatingly low. Torpedo attacks were more dangerous, but required precise approach geometry. American torpedo planes had to fly straight and level at low altitude for extended periods to make accurate drops. That long, straight approach was also a long period of vulnerability. Japanese anti-aircraft gunners had learned to concentrate their fire on the approach axis. Zero fighters, the best carrier fighters in the Pacific, could intercept torpedo planes before they reached release range. The American losses in torpedo attacks throughout 1942 had been severe enough to make Japanese naval officers view the tactic as manageable, something that killed Americans in exchange for occasional hits on Japanese ships. An acceptable exchange. Captain Tomichiro Harada, commanding the destroyer Shiraayuki, had sailed the route between Rabaul and Lae multiple times. He had watched anti-aircraft guns drive off American bombers. He had seen torpedo attacks fail. He had drilled his gun crews to concentrate their 25mm cannons on approaching aircraft, to lead their targets correctly, to maintain steady fire even when under stress. The convoy's combined anti-aircraft defenses were impressive. More than 12 5mm guns, dozens of 13mm machine guns, the 5-inch dual-purpose guns of 8 destroyers. Japanese doctrine called the combined fire of multiple ships an umbrella of steel over the convoy. It had been an accurate description against every previous form of American aerial attack. Commander Yasumi Doi aboard the destroyer, Tokitsukaze, had spent weeks training his gun crews for exactly this kind of mission. He was confident in them. The Americans would come because American reconnaissance aircraft would inevitably spot a convoy this size. They would come with B-17s at altitude and B-25s at medium altitude and perhaps torpedo planes. His crews would respond exactly as trained. The convoy would take losses, probably, but the 51st Division would reach Leh. The flaw in this analysis was not tactical. It was categorical. Japanese naval officers were preparing for forms of attack they understood and had faced before. They were not preparing for something that had never existed. Major Paul Irvin Gunn had a different relationship with the problem. Gunn was 42 years old in 1942, a former Navy pilot who had flown in the Philippines before the war and had evacuated his family from Manila ahead of the Japanese advance by personally flying them out on aircraft. He commandeered through force of will and professional relationships. He had been commissioned into the Army Air Forces as a major after the fall of the Philippines. He was known universally as Pappy. He understood aircraft at the level of physics and mechanics rather than doctrine, and he understood that what the Army Air Forces needed in the Southwest Pacific was not a better high-altitude bomber. It was a way to put enough firepower into a low-flying aircraft to destroy the anti-aircraft defenses of Japanese ships before those defenses could destroy the aircraft. Working with North American Aviation Field Representative Jack Fox at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane, Australia, Gunn began installing additional 50 caliber machine guns in the nose of B-25 Mitchell bombers in mid-1942. The bombardier position was removed. The nose was reinforced to handle the weight and recoil of multiple guns, 4 guns initially, then experiments with 6, eventually 8. The work required solving problems that no manufacturer's manual addressed because no manufacturer had designed an aircraft to do this. The recoil of 8 50 caliber guns firing simultaneously put loads on the nose structure that required custom reinforcement. Ammunition storage for 8 guns at high fire rates required creative rerouting of feed systems through spaces originally designed for navigation equipment and bombardier positions. The 50 caliber machine gun that Gunn chose fired the M8 armor-piercing incendiary round, a projectile weighing 619 grains, traveling at 2,910 feet per second, capable of penetrating the thin deck armor of destroyers and starting fires with its incendiary component on impact. Each gun could fire 850 rounds per minute. 8 guns firing together produced 6,800 rounds per minute, a stream of armor-piercing incendiary projectiles arriving faster than any counting system could track, each one carrying enough energy to punch through quarter-inch steel plate and detonate against anything behind it. What this meant in practical terms for a Japanese sailor standing at an anti-aircraft gun when a B-25 opened fire at 1,200 yards was that several hundred rounds would reach his position in the seconds before he could react, not fired in sequence, simultaneously. 8 streams converging on whatever the pilot was pointing at. The guns alone were revolutionary. What made them decisive was the tactic developed to deliver them. Major William Benn of the 43rd Bombardment Group had been experimenting with skip bombing using B-17s, discovering that bombs dropped from 200 to 250 feet above the water would bounce like stones across the surface and slam into the hulls of ships at the waterline. The technique turned the water surface into an extension of the bomb's trajectory. Instead of trying to drop a bomb onto a ship from above, the pilot flew toward the ship at low altitude, released the bomb short of the target, and let physics do the rest. The bomb bounced once, twice, then struck the hull below the waterline where the detonation caused maximum structural damage. Delay fuses allowed the bomb to penetrate the hull before exploding. The accuracy achieved by skip bombing was revolutionary compared to high-altitude bombing. Pilots practicing against the wreck of the SS Pruth on a reef near Port Moresby learned to consistently place bombs within feet of intended impact points. The technique required courage because it required flying straight and level toward the target at low altitude, making the aircraft temporarily predictable. But it also required the pilot to approach close enough to guarantee bomb accuracy. At the speed a B-25 flew, the exposure window was measured in seconds. General George Kenney, commanding the 5th Air Force, understood what combining these elements produced. 8 guns clearing the deck of a target ship before the pilot reached bomb release point. Skip bombs penetrating the hull at the waterline while the deck guns were still silenced. The guns suppressed the defense. The bombs sank the ship. Working together, they could destroy Japanese vessels faster than any previous form of aerial attack. He called the modified aircraft commerce destroyers. The name was accurate in the way that military euphemisms rarely are. By March of 1943, the 3rd Attack Group had fully converted to the 8-gun nose configuration. The 90th Bombardment Squadron, under Major Edward Larner, had developed attack tactics through months of practice and actual combat. The standard profile called for the B-25 to approach at 1,000 to 1,500 feet altitude, then drop to wavetop height approximately 2 miles from the target. At that altitude, the aircraft was below the effective engagement range of most heavy anti-aircraft guns. It was also below the horizon from ships until extremely close, making early detection difficult. The pilot would accelerate to maximum speed and align his aircraft with the target ship's axis. At 1,500 yards, he opened fire with all 8 nose guns. He maintained fire and his approach until bomb release point. Then he dropped 2 500-pound skip bombs, pulled up sharply, and flew over the target while his gunner engaged deck targets with the turret-mounted 50 caliber gun. The entire attack from first gunfire to bomb release lasted approximately 8 seconds. In those 8 seconds, each gun fired over 100 rounds. 8 guns produced approximately 900 rounds total. 900 armor-piercing incendiary projectiles into whatever the pilot was targeting in 8 seconds. Japanese naval doctrine had no answer for this, because Japanese naval doctrine had never been required to have one. The weapon did not exist before Pappy Gunn built it in a workshop in Brisbane. The convoy Kimura commanded entered Japanese airspace northeast of New Guinea on March 2, 1943. American reconnaissance aircraft spotted it immediately. Kenney's intelligence network had been tracking the convoy's preparation at Rabaul for days. The B-17 flying fortresses of the 43rd Group flew the first attacks on March 2nd, bombing from high altitude. They hit 1 transport. Expected results. The kind of attack Japanese naval officers had been managing for a year. High-altitude bombing. Ships maneuvered. Most bombs missed. 1 hit. The convoy continued. March 3rd, 0600. Kimura watches from his bridge. The convoy formation is precise. The destroyers are where they should be. The morning sky is clear enough for air operations. He has fighter cover assigned from Rabaul. He has everything Japanese naval doctrine says he needs. At 0920, Lieutenant Commander Asada aboard the destroyer Asagumo reports multiple contacts at medium altitude. American aircraft, B-17s and B-25s, approaching at approximately 7,000 feet. The gun crews on every ship in the convoy swing their weapons toward the incoming formation. Exactly the kind of attack they have prepared for. Exactly the kind of attack they have trained to defeat. The anti-aircraft umbrella that has protected Japanese convoys since December 7th, 1941, goes up. What the lookouts do not see are the other aircraft. 13 Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters and 12 B-25 Mitchells of the 3rd Attack Group approaching from the southwest at wavetop height, so low that their propeller wash creates spray trails on the ocean surface. The B-17s at 7,000 feet are drawing every Japanese eye upward, every gun barrel pointing skyward. The attack is not 2 separate waves. It is one coordinated operation in which the high-altitude bombers are the distraction. Major Edward Larner leads the B-25 formation in his Mitchell. He can see the convoy clearly from wavetop height. He can see the gun crews on the Japanese destroyers, every barrel pointing at the high bombers. He selects the destroyer Shiraayuki as his primary target. He is doing 280 miles per hour. At that speed, the closing distance from 2 miles to bomb release takes less than 30 seconds. He drops to 50 feet above the water. At 1,200 yards, Larner's thumb presses the trigger. 8 50 caliber machine guns open simultaneously. The tracer rounds create solid lines of light between the aircraft and the destroyer's bridge. The rounds arrive before the sound of the guns does. Before anyone on the Shiraayuki's bridge has registered what is happening, the bridge windows have been blown inward by concussion. Japanese ensign Takashi Mieta, one of the few survivors from the Shiraayuki's bridge, would later describe the attack as being caught in a giant metal-cutting saw. His captain and most of the bridge crew cut down in seconds by rounds that sparked and flashed as they tore through steel bulkheads that had never been designed to stop .50 caliber fire. The thin armor of the gun shields provides no protection. The shields are designed to protect gun crews from blast and fragmentation from exploding bombs or shells arriving from outside the ship's defensive perimeter. They are not designed to stop large caliber machine gun fire arriving at 2,910 feet per second from directly ahead. The gun crews that Japanese naval doctrine counted on to defend the convoy cannot operate weapons that have been destroyed by rounds that arrive faster than the human ability to react. Lana maintains his firing run for 8 seconds, 900 rounds into the Shiraayuki's bridge and forward superstructure. Then, 2 500-pound bombs skip across the water and slam into the destroyer's hull below the waterline. The delay fuses allow them to penetrate before detonating. The explosions break the Shiraayuki's back. Her engine rooms begin flooding within minutes. She is listing heavily to port before Lana has completed his pullout. Behind Lana, 11 more B-25s are selecting targets across the convoy. The attack follows no single axis. Aircraft approach from multiple directions simultaneously. Japanese captains trying to maneuver to present their sterns to one attacker find themselves broadside to another. The formation discipline that had protected Japanese convoys in previous engagements becomes a liability, as ships trying to maintain position cannot maneuver freely. Lieutenant John Hennebury in his B-25 targets the transport Kyokusei Maru. He walks his 8-gun burst from bow to stern at low altitude, watching his tracers punch through the ship's bridge and destroy her forward anti-aircraft positions. The transport's captain attempts to maneuver away. The helmsman is dead. The bridge crew is dead. The Kyokusei Maru continues on her last heading until skip bombs tear into her hull. The bowfighters add to the destruction. Their 4 20mm cannons and 6 303 caliber machine guns focus on anti-aircraft positions and bridge crews on the ships that the B-25s have not yet reached. Flight Sergeant Fred Cassidy of No. 30 Squadron RAAF comes in at 500 feet, diving to mast height in the final approach, his cannons tearing through the bridge structure of the transport Teiyo Maru. Cassidy would later describe watching the bridge disintegrate under the impact of 20mm explosive rounds, seeing Japanese sailors thrown into the air by the detonations, watching lifeboats shatter as his rounds found them. Commander Doi aboard the Tokitsukaze watches his carefully trained gun crews swept away by streams of .50 caliber fire. He shouts orders to redirect fire toward the low-flying attackers. His gunners are being killed faster than they can be replaced at their positions. Those who survive long enough to understand what is approaching them abandon their posts before the rounds arrive. The Japanese Navy has never trained for this, has never developed tactics to counter an attack that combines strafing and skip bombing at wave-top height. The training that should have been their defense was based on entirely different forms of attack. The destroyer Arashio attempts to maneuver between the attacking aircraft and the transports. Her captain's intention is to shield the vulnerable cargo ships with his warship. It is an act of pure courage. 3 B-25s concentrate their fire on the Arashio. 24 guns firing simultaneously, more than 2,000 rounds per minute into her superstructure. Her bridge crew is killed. Her fire control systems are destroyed. Her rudder jams hard to starboard. Out of control, the Arashio collides with the transport Nojima. Both ships lock together as fires spread between them. Admiral Kimura watches from his bridge as his convoy disintegrates in ways that Japanese naval experience has no framework to interpret. American aircraft are not following any recognized attack profile. They are not making torpedo runs that can be avoided with evasive maneuvers. They are not dropping bombs from altitude that ships can dodge. They are boring in at point-blank range with automatic weapons that turn his ships into slaughterhouses before any defensive response can be organized. He orders evasive maneuvers. The B-25s are too fast and too numerous. They seem to arrive from every direction simultaneously. His escorts cannot put themselves between the attackers and the transports fast enough. His transports cannot maneuver independently without breaking the formation that his doctrine requires. His anti-aircraft guns cannot be brought to bear on targets that approach below their minimum depression angle and close the firing distance in seconds. The transport Oigawa Maru turns to present her broadside to a group of approaching B-25s. It is the worst decision her captain could make. It is also an understandable one, because the instinct when facing an approaching threat is to maximize the number of guns that can engage it. Against conventional aerial attack, the instinct is sometimes correct. Against 850 caliber guns approaching at wave-top height, presenting a broadside simply gives the attacker a longer target. Lieutenant Donald McCullough in his B-25 opens fire at 1,500 yards. His 8 guns send armor-piercing incendiary rounds into the Oigawa Maru's hull at the waterline. The rounds penetrate the ship's side and start fires in cargo holds where ammunition and fuel are stored. Secondary explosions blow out sections of the hull. McCullough's skip bombs finish what his guns began. The Oigawa Maru breaks apart. She sinks within minutes. Most of the 1,500 soldiers embarked in her holds die in the flooding compartments without ever reaching the deck. The transport Nojima takes 3 skip bomb hits in rapid succession. The explosions open her hull like a can opener. In her holds, hundreds of soldiers of the 51st Division are packed into spaces meant for cargo, wearing full combat equipment that will drag them down in the flooding. Witnesses from surviving vessels describe hearing screams even over the sound of aircraft engines and exploding ammunition. The attack lasts 15 minutes. At 10:15 on the morning of March 3, 1943, the last B-25 disappears toward the south. Admiral Kimura surveys what remains of his convoy. All 8 transports are sinking or sunk. Their burning hulls mark positions across 60 miles of ocean, funeral pyres visible from 100 miles. 4 of his 8 destroyers are gone, including his own flagship, the Shiraayuki. The surviving destroyers have damage to varying degrees, their decks covered with dead and wounded, their superstructures riddled with 50 caliber holes that left metal edges folded inward where rounds passed through. The surviving destroyers begin rescue operations. The water is full of debris and bodies, and relatively few living soldiers. Of the 6,900 troops who sailed from Rabaul, fewer than 1,200 will eventually reach Leh. Most of those will be rescued by Japanese submarines that arrive after dark, slipping through waters too dangerous for surface ships to operate in daylight. The 51st Division has been destroyed not in ground combat where soldiers could fight back, not by naval gunfire where sailors could at least see the threat, but by modified bombers that turned their transports into death traps in 15 minutes over open ocean. Captain Harada, one of the few senior officers to survive, wrote afterward that the attack was like nothing we had ever experienced or imagined possible. He described watching the B-25 noses approach and understanding in the last seconds that whatever was about to happen was different from anything Japanese naval training had prepared him for. The phrase he used in his after-action account was that the Americans seemed to saw the ships apart with their guns. He meant it as description, not metaphor. The concentrated fire of 850 caliber guns at close range produced a physical effect on ship superstructures that resembled nothing so much as a cutting tool moving through material. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto received the report of the Bismar Sea disaster with visible shock. He understood immediately and completely what the destruction of the convoy meant strategically. Japan could no longer risk surface vessels in waters within range of American aircraft. The Navy's inability to protect a heavily escorted convoy of 8 destroyers meant that reinforcement and resupply of forward positions in the Solomons and New Guinea had become effectively impossible. Garrisons that could not be supplied would wither. Positions that could not be reinforced would eventually fall. The strategic map of the Southwest Pacific had changed in 15 minutes over the Bismar Sea. Yamamoto ordered an immediate review of convoy procedures and anti-aircraft defenses. He privately admitted to his staff that there might be no effective counter to the American strafer bombers. The review would eventually produce some tactical adjustments, additional light anti-aircraft guns on transports, tighter fighter cover schedules, preference for night operations. None of these adjustments would prove adequate. They were refinements to a doctrine that had been rendered obsolete by an entirely new category of weapon. The modification program that produced this result had begun with one man working with improvised resources. Pappy Gunn's experiments at Eagle Farm were conducted without official sponsorship, without a formal development program, without the institutional support that usually accompanies weapons development. Gunn was a former Navy pilot who had been given a temporary Army commission and assigned to logistics work that was beneath his capabilities. He understood what the 5th Air Force needed because he understood both aircraft and combat. He started installing guns in the nose of a B-25 because he believed it would work, and he convinced Jack Fox and the mechanics at Eagle Farm to help him build what he was imagining. The engineering challenges were real. The 50 caliber machine gun weighs 64 pounds. 8 guns weigh 512 pounds before ammunition. 400 rounds per gun, the standard load, adds another 320 pounds of brass and steel and propellant. The total weight added to the nose of an aircraft designed for a bombardier and a small nose gun was over 800 pounds, concentrated in the forward section. The center of gravity problem was significant. The structural reinforcement required to handle the combined recoil of 8 guns firing simultaneously added more weight. The ammunition feed systems had to be routed through spaces originally designed for other equipment. Gunn and his team solved these problems through trial and error conducted on actual aircraft with actual tests against actual targets. They discovered the correct reinforcement points by observing where stress cracked on early versions. They refined the ammunition feeds by tracing jams to their sources and redesigning the feed paths. The harmonization of 8 guns to converge their fire at optimal range required careful measurement and adjustment. Every problem had a practical solution. Gunn and his mechanics were practical men. By the time the 3rd Attack Group went operational with the 8-gun nose configuration, the weapon had been refined through months of actual combat experience. The attack profile, approach altitude, gun opening range, bomb release point, pull-out angle, had been developed by pilots who had flown the missions and survived them and debriefed with each other afterward. The doctrine that won the Battle of the Bismar Sea was not written by staff officers at a headquarters. It was developed by men who flew the aircraft against the targets and recorded what worked. The psychological impact on the Imperial Japanese Navy proved as significant as the physical losses. News of the convoy's destruction spread through the fleet with unusual speed because the scale of the disaster made it impossible to minimize in internal reporting. Naval officers who had dismissed American bombing as ineffective were forced to confront the reality that the Americans had developed a form of attack against which traditional anti-aircraft defenses provided no protection. The 50 caliber rounds in the 8-gun nose arrived faster than gun crews could respond. The skip bombs hit at the waterline where even undamaged ships were most vulnerable. The combination left no tactical interval in which a ship's defenders could affect the outcome. The garrison at Leh, which the March 3rd convoy was meant to reinforce, never received the men and supplies it needed. Japanese forces evacuated Leh in September of 1943, conducting a withdrawal through jungle and mountains under conditions that killed men from starvation and disease at rates comparable to combat losses. The 6,900 soldiers who had waited weeks at Rabaul for weather conditions that would allow the convoy to sail, the men who had been promised safe passage to New Guinea, were gone. Most had died in the flooded holds of transports destroyed in 15 minutes by aircraft they had never had a chance to fight. The B-25 strafer program expanded rapidly after the Bismarck Sea. The 345th Bombardment Group, known as the Air Apaches, converted to the 8-gun nose configuration in August of 1943. Their aircraft decorated with shark mouth nose art that Japanese sailors would come to recognize as the last thing many of them saw. The 38th Bombardment Group developed techniques for attacking harbors and anchorages at night, using radar to locate targets in complete darkness. By late 1943, Japanese naval officers were reporting that daylight movement of anything larger than a fishing boat had become suicidal in waters within B-25 range. The assessment was not exaggerated. The impact on Japanese logistics cascaded through every campaign in the Southwest Pacific. Surface convoys had been the primary method of supplying forward garrisons because submarines and fast destroyers could carry only a fraction of the tonnage that transports could move. Restricting resupply to submarines and night destroyer runs meant that Japanese forces throughout the Pacific began experiencing shortages that degraded their combat effectiveness before any ground engagement occurred. Soldiers without adequate ammunition, food and medical supplies cannot fight effectively regardless of their individual courage or training. The August raid on Wewak on August 17th through 21st of 1943 demonstrated the versatility of the strafer configuration against land targets. B-25 sweeping Wewak's airfields at treetop level destroyed over 170 Japanese aircraft in operations that left the 4th Air Army effectively combat ineffective. Japanese pilots who survived described the horror of watching B-25s approach at treetop altitude with their nose guns destroying dispersed aircraft before skip bombs finished the destruction. Aircraft that had been carefully dispersed to survive high-altitude bombing were defenseless against weapons that arrived horizontally at their altitude. The North American Aviation Factory incorporated Gunn's field modifications into production aircraft, beginning with the B-25J. Late production variants carried 8 nose guns as standard equipment. Some field modifications went further. The B-25J-22, the ultimate production variant, carried 8 nose guns, 4 package guns on the fuselage sides, 2 guns in the top turret, 2 in waist positions, and 2 in the tail. 1850 caliber machine guns on a single medium bomber. The aircraft that Pappy Gunn had sketched out in a Brisbane workshop in mid-1942 had become a production weapon system that manufacturers were building by the hundreds. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, Chief of Staff of the Combined Fleet, admitted in a classified internal report that the Imperial Navy had no effective defense against mass strafer attacks. He recommended that surface vessels avoid operating within 500 miles of American air bases. The recommendation, if followed, would have conceded vast areas of the Pacific to American freedom of movement, while confining Japanese surface forces to ports that were themselves under increasing threat from air attack. The practical result was that Japan's island empire, dependent on sea communications to sustain garrisons scattered across thousands of miles of ocean, was being systematically strangled by aircraft that had been converted from medium bombers by a former Navy pilot working in a field workshop. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, the last commander-in-chief of the Imperial Japanese Combined Fleet, stated in his post-war analysis that the 8-gun B-25 destroyed Japan's ability to move by sea, a capability that Japan, as an island nation, could not afford to lose. The assessment was direct and accurate. Japan's strategic position in the Pacific required freedom of movement by sea to be sustainable. The B-25 strafer program eliminated that freedom of movement faster than any other single weapon system in the theater. The crews who flew these missions understood they were doing something that no training manual had prepared them for and no pre-war doctrine had anticipated. They were flying bombers at 50 feet above the ocean toward ships with functioning anti-aircraft guns, opening fire at ranges where small caliber weapons could reach them, holding their approach steady while rounds came back at them, releasing bombs that had to bounce correctly to be effective, then pulling up sharply to avoid flying into the ship they had just attacked. The low-level attack profile that made the weapon effective was also the profile that made it most dangerous for the crew. Ground fire and ship-based fire that heavy anti-aircraft guns could not depress to engage was entirely within the envelope of light weapons. Hits on a B-25 flying at 50 feet above the water were almost always fatal. There was no altitude to provide a bailout option. There was no time for a controlled ditching. Pilots who were hit in the final seconds of their attack run flew into the ocean or into the target. The 3rd Attack Group lost over 40 B-25s during the war, most of them during low-level strafing attacks. The men who flew these missions knew the statistics. They flew anyway because the statistics of what happened to Japanese shipping when they didn't fly were worse for the overall outcome. That calculus, understood viscerally if not in those terms by men who were 22 and 23 years old, is what the decorated records cannot fully capture. The technological lineage from Pappy Gunn's 8-gun nose runs forward through every subsequent American gunship aircraft. The AC-47 Spooky of Vietnam, the AC-130 Spectre that became standard in every conflict from Central America through Afghanistan, the A-10 Thunderbolt II Warthog with its 30mm rotary cannon that can destroy armored vehicles from low altitude, The concept that a heavily armed aircraft operating at close range to its targets is one of the most flexible and effective weapons in the inventory has been proven in every conflict since the Pacific War. Its ancestry is a former Navy pilot removing the bombardier's seat from a B-25 in Brisbane and installing a gun mount in the space that was left. Japanese military historians, writing in the decades after the war, identified the B-25 strafer as one of 3 innovations that determined the outcome of the Pacific War alongside radar and code breaking. The inability to protect shipping from strafer attack meant that Japan's scattered garrisons could not be sustained. The empire that had stretched from the Central Pacific to Burma, from the Aleutians to the Dutch East Indies, required sea communications to exist as a coherent military force. When those communications became untenable under air attack, the empire began contracting toward the home islands, regardless of what happened in individual ground engagements. Professor Masanori Ito of the Japanese Defense University wrote that the strafer bomber destroyed not just Japan's ships, but Japan's entire concept of naval warfare, forcing abandonment of offensive operations earlier than would otherwise have been necessary. The assessment identifies something important. It was not only the physical destruction of shipping that mattered, it was the psychological and strategic paralysis that the threat of strafer attack induced in Japanese operational planning. Operations that were routine in 1942 became impossible in 1943. Not because they failed, but because Japanese commanders no longer believed they could be conducted without unacceptable losses. That anticipatory paralysis was itself a form of defeat. Admiral Kimura's convoy had sailed with every advantage that Japanese naval doctrine could provide. 8 destroyers with practiced gun crews, fighter cover from Rabaul, formation discipline built on 2 years of wartime experience, the confidence that comes from having sailed these waters before and survived. None of it was adequate against an attack form that had not existed until a former Navy pilot built it in a Brisbane workshop and tested it against Japanese shipping until the tactics were perfected. Captain Harada's description of the attack as sawing the ships apart was more accurate than he intended it to be. 8 50 caliber guns firing simultaneously at close range do not punch holes in a target. They remove material. They destroy superstructure components too quickly for any damage control response to matter. They silence gun crews before the gun crews can respond. They kill the people on bridges before the people on bridges can give orders. And then the skip bombs hit at the waterline, below the damage that the guns have done, where the structural integrity of the ship determines whether it sinks or survives. The ship sank. 6,900 soldiers had been promised to lay. Fewer than 1,200 arrived. Pappy Gunn's 8-gun nose had destroyed an empire's ability to sustain itself, one convoy at a time, in 15-minute engagements over open ocean that left burning wrecks visible from 100 miles, and survivors in the water who had never had a chance to fight back. If this story changed how you understand the Pacific War, hit the like button right now. Every like tells YouTube to show this story to more people who have never heard Pappy Gunn's name or understood what happened over the Bismar Sea on March 3rd, 1943. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we find these buried stories every single week. Stories about the mechanic who built a weapon in a field workshop that outperformed everything the manufacturers designed. Stories about 6,900 soldiers who never reached New Guinea. Stories about the 8-gun nose that strangled an empire. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if someone in your family flew B-25s in the Pacific or served in the 5th Air Force. Tell us what you knew about the Battle of the Bismar Sea before this video and what you know now. This community spans the entire world. You're not just watching. You're part of keeping these names and these stories alive. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure that Pappy Gunn, who took a medium bomber and turned it into the most feared anti-shipping weapon in the Pacific War without a formal development program or institutional support, is remembered as what he was, not just an improviser, not just a mechanic with good ideas, but the man whose workshop in Brisbane helped determine the outcome of the Pacific War. The 8-gun nose changed everything. 15 minutes over the Bismar Sea proved it. And now, because you watched this, you know exactly why.